I didn't think much of the rules when I first saw them. That was probably my first mistake. They were written on the back of an old Park Service form, folded twice, and tucked inside the cover of my uncle's cabin logbook. The paper had gone soft at the creases. The ink was faded in places. At the top, in my uncle's careful block letters, he had written, "Rules for the dark. Not night. Not winter. Not the cabin. The dark." At the time, I thought that was just my uncle being dramatic. He had lived alone too long. That was what people said about him. He had spent almost 20 years in that cabin near the edge of North Braid National Preserve, checking old trail cameras, relaying radio messages when storms knocked out the main towers, and doing small maintenance jobs nobody else wanted to drive out for. He was my mother's older brother. His name was Caleb Holt. Most people called him Cal. I called him Uncle Cal when I was a kid, then just Cal once I was grown and thought I was too old for things like that. I hadn't seen him in almost 9 years when the state finally mailed me the papers. He had been missing for 3 winters. Not dead officially at first. Missing. Then presumed dead. Then, once enough time had passed and no one argued about it, the cabin came to me. That sounds like something useful. A cabin in Alaska. Land. Privacy. A chance to get away. It wasn't that kind of cabin. It sat 43 miles from the nearest paved road, about 9 miles inside a maintenance corridor that was technically closed to regular traffic after October. The cabin itself was old, square, and low, built on wooden posts above hard frozen ground. It had a green metal roof, a small radio mast, a wood stove, a propane tank, a battery bank, and one narrow bedroom barely big enough for a bunk and a dresser. It came with no internet except a weak satellite text terminal that worked when it felt like it. It came with no plumbing in winter except a hand pump that froze if you forgot the heater tape. It came with a generator that sounded like it was arguing with itself. And it came with a seasonal caretaker agreement from the Park Service. That part mattered. My uncle had not owned the land. He owned the structure because of some old grandfathered arrangement, but the access road, tower, and relay equipment belonged to the preserve. If I wanted to keep the cabin, I had to maintain the relay station through the winter or pay to have the structure removed. I didn't have that kind of money. I was 31 then. I had been working warehouse nights in Anchorage, loading freight that other people ordered and forgot about. My mother had died the year before. Rent had gone up. I had a truck that made a bad noise in second gear. I was tired in a way sleep did not fix. So when the park office explained that there was a small monthly stipend if I stayed in the cabin through the dark season and logged the relay checks, I said yes. It was not enough money. But it was steady. That was enough for me then. The woman who met me at the maintenance yard was named Mara Voss. She was a ranger in her late 50s, thin, calm, and weathered in the way people get when they spend more time outside than inside. She had gray hair tucked under a green cap and hands that looked like they could fix anything with wire and tape. "You ever wintered alone?" she asked me while we loaded fuel cans and dry goods into my truck. "No," I said. She looked at me for a second. Then she handed me another box of radio batteries. "Don't lie in the logs," she said. "If something breaks, write it down. If you skip a check, write it down. If you get scared and drive out, write it down." I laughed a little because I thought she was joking. She didn't laugh back. The drive-in took almost 2 hours even with the weather clear. The road was not really a road by the end. It was a white track between black spruce and low hills. The sky had that heavy November color, not fully dark, not fully light, like the whole world was waiting for a decision. Mara rode with me for the last stretch because she knew where the road disappeared under drifts. She pointed out places by names that did not show up on any map. That's Blind Creek. Don't trust it after thaw. That ridge blocks the radio for about half a mile. That clearing is where we found Cal's truck. I looked over before I could stop myself. There was nothing there but snow and a few bent spruce trees. No body? I asked. No, she said. She didn't soften it. I should have asked more. I know that now. I should have asked if he had walked into the trees, or if there were tracks, or if anyone had been with him. Instead, I kept driving. The cabin appeared all at once, tucked below a dark line of spruce. It looked smaller than I remembered from the few summers the first had visited as a kid. The green roof was faded. The porch leaned a little. A narrow path had been cleared from the woodshed to the front step, but snow had started filling it again. There was another building 30 yards behind it, a squat concrete structure with a metal door. Mara called it the relay hut. It held the park radio repeater, backup batteries, and a small panel of lights that I was supposed to check twice a day. Inside, the cabin smelled like cold ashes, cedar, mice, and old coffee. It had one main room with the stove, a table, a sink, 2 shelves of canned food, and a little radio desk under the front window. There were maps pinned to the wall. A row of keys hung on nails by the door. The bedroom was on the left. The pantry was on the right, narrow and windowless, with shelves stacked with flour, beans, lanterns, duct tape, and unlabeled jars. Everything was ordinary. That is what I keep coming back to. The place did not feel cursed when I arrived. It felt neglected. Mara walked me through the routine. Morning check at 7 o'clock. Evening check at 5 o'clock. Log battery voltage. Log tower signal. Log outside temperature. Run generator if the battery bank dropped below 24 volts. Keep the stove going during deep cold. Do not let the pump line freeze. Radio call every night at 8:30 with the main ranger station. If I missed 2 scheduled calls, someone would come looking when weather allowed. When weather allows can mean 3 days, Mara said. I know. You don't know yet, she said. Again, I thought she was just being serious because of the job. Before she left, she stood in the doorway with her gloves in one hand and looked around the cabin. Cal kept a black notebook, she said. I pointed at the table. This one? She nodded. Read it. I will. I mean, read it before dark. Something in her voice made me pause. You knew him pretty well? Well enough, she said. Then she stepped out onto the porch. Her snow machine was parked beside the woodshed. She had followed me in on it while I brought the truck. She put on her gloves, tightened her hood, and looked at the trees behind the cabin. Did Cal ever tell you why he stayed out here? She asked. I shrugged. He liked being alone. Mara looked at me. No one likes being alone that much. Then she started the snow machine and left. I watched her red tail light move down the trail until the spruce swallowed it. For a while after that, I just stood there in the open doorway, listening to the engine fade. Then the silence came in. I do not mean quiet. I mean silence. The kind that has weight. The kind that makes small sounds seem too loud. My breathing. The stove settling. The soft tick of snow hitting the porch rail. I shut the door. I unpacked the truck. I stacked my food on the shelves. I set my sleeping bag on the bunk, hung my coat by the stove, and checked the old radio because that felt like the most official thing to do. At 4:40, the light outside started to fail. That far north, in November, daylight did not so much end as give up. I remembered what Mara had said about the notebook. It was on the table, black cover cracked at the corners, pages swollen from damp. My uncle had written dates inside going back years. Most entries were dull. Battery good. Wind from east. Snowshoe hair under porch. Generator belt loose. Trail chem 2 down again. Mouse sign behind flower. Then, about halfway through, the handwriting changed. Not much. Just tighter. More careful. Like he had started thinking about every word. I flipped toward the back. That was when the folded paper slid out. Rules for the dark. I sat at the table and read them while the last gray light pressed against the windows. There were 6. Rule 1. Before the sun is gone, close every curtain and latch both doors. Do not open them again until you hear the first bird call after dawn. Rule 2. After 10 p.m., keep the porch light off. If you look out and see it on anyway, do not touch the switch. Go into the pantry and stay there until it goes dark by itself. Rule 3. Do not answer the radio after dark unless the caller gives the station code first. If the caller uses your full name, remove the battery and put it in the flour tin until the clock reaches the next hour. Rule 4. If something knocks from under the floor, do not look through the cracks. Knock once on the black stove and say, "Occupied." Do not say anything else. Rule 5. If trail camera 3 shows me standing beside the bent spruce, turn the monitor off. Do not go outside. I am not there anymore. Rule 6. If anyone asks who owns the cabin after dark, say, "Caleb Holt does." Do not give your name. I read them twice. Then I laughed. Not because they were funny. They were not funny. I laughed because that was easier than thinking about why my uncle would write them. I told myself they were old man habits. Cabin superstitions. Maybe things he used to keep himself disciplined during the dark months. The first rule made sense if you stretched it. Heat loss. Animals. Wind. The radio rule could be about prank calls or interference. The porch light one might have been because the switch was bad. The knocking under the floor was probably animals. The trail camera rule was sadder. Maybe he had known he was slipping. Maybe he worried he would wander outside in storms and wanted a way to scare himself back indoors. The 6th rule was the only one that bothered me. If anyone asks who owns the cabin after dark. That felt too specific. Still, I folded the paper and set it beside the logbook. At 4:58, I did my first evening check. I pulled on my coat, crossed the yard to the relay hut, and unlocked the metal door. Inside, the equipment hummed in a dry little room that smelled like dust and warm plastic. Green lights blinked in rows. A laminated checklist hung on a clipboard. Main bank, 25.8 volts. Repeater online. Solar regulator, standby. Temperature, -11 Celsius. I wrote it all down. When I came back to the cabin, the sky had gone almost black. I remembered Rule 1. I stood there with my hand on the door and felt stupid. Then I closed the curtains. All of them. The kitchen curtain. The front room curtain. The narrow bedroom curtain. The small square window in the pantry door. I latched the back door, then the front. The cabin had old sliding bolts above the handles, heavy ones. I dropped them into place. It felt silly. It also felt good. At 8:30, the radio crackled. Braid 12, main station. Evening check. I picked up the handset. Main station, this is Braid 12. Relay online. Battery 25.8. Temperature -11. No issues. Copy, Braid 12, a male voice said. You settling in? Trying. Keep the stove fed. Weather coming tomorrow. Copy. That was it. Normal. I made beans on the stove. I ate from the pot. I checked the old wall clock about 6 times because the ticking seemed too loud. At 10, I looked at the porch light switch. It was off. I left it off. Nothing happened. The first night passed without incident. If things had gone wrong immediately, I think I might have left. But they did not. The next morning, I woke before dawn because the cabin had gone cold. I built the fire back up, made coffee, and waited for bird call because the rules said not to open the curtains until then. That part annoyed me. There were no birds. Not at first. Just wind and trees and the faint creak of the cabin shifting on its posts. At 8:12 I heard a single sharp chirp outside. A real bird. Small. Close to the roof. I opened the curtains. The world outside was pale blue and empty. I checked the snow around the porch. No tracks except mine. I felt relieved, then embarrassed for being relieved. By the third day, the routine had started to take shape. Morning check. Split wood. Melt snow for washing. Sweep the floor. Log weather. Eat something. Read old paperbacks from the shelf. Evening check. Curtains. Radio. Stove. Sleep. There is a comfort in routine when you are alone. It gives the day edges. It tells you where to put your hands and eyes. But out there, routine also made the silence feel watched. At first, I blamed the cabin. Old places always sound occupied. Wood ticks. Metal pops. Wind moves along seams. Snow slides off the roof. The first strange thing happened on the 4th night. It was small. That matters. It was so small that I almost did not write it down. I had finished the 8:30 call and was cleaning my pan with a little snow when I heard the printer at the radio desk start clicking. I did not even know there was a printer. It was an old thermal unit connected to the weather terminal. Mara had shown me how to check the text forecast, but she had not mentioned that it printed anything. The little machine spat out a narrow strip of paper. I walked over and tore it off. It said, "Order received." That was all. No number. No message. Just order received. I stared at it for a while. Then I checked the terminal. No outgoing message. No incoming message. No connection notice. Nothing. I told myself it was just a glitch. That phrase became important later. I told myself it was just a glitch. I said it out loud more than once in that cabin. The printer clicked again. Another strip came out. Order received. Then another. Order received. Then another. Order received. I turned the terminal off. The printer stopped. I stood there with 3 strips of paper in my hand while the stove breathed warm air into the room. Outside, something brushed against the front wall. Lightly. Like a sleeve passing over wood. I looked at the curtain. Rule 1 came back to me before I moved. Do not open them again until you hear the first bird call after dawn. I stayed where I was. The brushing sound came again. Slow. From left to right. Then right to left. I thought of a branch. There were no branches close to that wall. I almost checked anyway. That is the thing about rules that make no sense. They do not feel real until something happens, and when something happens, your first instinct is to prove the rule is stupid. I took 1 step toward the window. The brushing stopped. Then a voice outside said, very softly, "Cal?" I froze. It was a woman's voice. Older. Tired. Not shouting. Not scared. Just saying my uncle's name through the wall. "Cal?" I did not answer. I did not move. The voice came again, closer to the window. "Cal, I can see the smoke." My mouth had gone dry. I remember thinking that maybe someone was lost. Maybe a hiker, even though the road was closed. Maybe a hunter, even though the season was wrong. Maybe Mara, though it was not her voice. Then I remembered the latch. I remembered the curtains. I remembered that the voice had not knocked. It had not called for help. It had only said my uncle's name. I backed away from the window and sat at the table. For the next 10 minutes, nothing happened. Then the wall creaked once, like someone had leaned their forehead against it. In the morning, I waited for the bird call. It came at 8:26. I opened the front curtain first. The snow outside the cabin was smooth except for one line pressed along the wall. Not footprints. Not animal tracks. A long, shallow line, about shoulder height, where frost had been rubbed from the wood. From left to right. Then right to left. I took pictures with my phone, even though I had no service. Then I did the morning check. Battery good. Repeater online. Temperature -18. I should have written the voice in the log. I did not. I wrote. Printer error after evening call. That was all. At 8:30 that night, the main station called as usual. Mara was on the radio. Braid 12, main station. Evening check. Main station, Braid 12. I said. Relay online. Battery 25.2. Temperature -20. No issues. There was a short pause. No issues? She asked. I looked at the strips of thermal paper on the desk. I had not thrown them away. No issues, I said. Copy. Another pause. Then she said, You reading Cal's notebook? Yes. All of it? Some. Read all of it. The radio clicked off. I slept badly that night. Or maybe I did not sleep at all. It is hard to separate sleep from the kind of staring you do in a dark cabin when the stove is low and every sound has a shape. Over the next week, nothing big happened. That almost made it worse. The printer did not click again. No one called through the walls. The radio behaved. The porch light stayed off. The trail camera monitor showed wind, snow, rabbits, and one skinny fox that moved like smoke. I began to relax. Not completely. But enough. I started thinking that first incident had been a person. Maybe a local who knew my uncle and did not know he was gone. Maybe they got scared and left before morning. Maybe the line on the wall was from wind dragging something. When you are alone, you can make almost anything sound reasonable if you need it to. On the 9th evening, the weather turned. Mara had warned me. The wind rose before sunset, steady at first, then harder. Snow came in sideways. The cabin shook in long pushes. The relay mast made a high whining sound that set my teeth on edge. At 5 o'clock, I almost skipped the evening check. The relay hut was only 30 yards away, but in that wind it looked farther. I went anyway. I kept one hand on the guide ropes strung between the cabin and the hut. The snow hit my face like thrown sand. By the time I got inside, my eyelashes had ice on them. The panels showed one amber light. Backup alignment warning. I checked the binder. It said amber was acceptable during high wind as long as main signal stayed green. It did. I logged it. On the way back, I thought I saw a man standing beside the bent spruce. That tree was easy to recognize. It leaned at a sharp angle near the edge of the woods, about 40 yards behind the cabin. Snow had built up on one side of its trunk, making it look like a crooked white shoulder. The man stood beside it. Tall. Bareheaded. Facing the cabin. I stopped with my hand on the rope. The storm moved around him, but he did not move with it. Then wind slammed snow into my eyes. When I cleared them, he was gone. I got inside, latched the door, and stood dripping on the mat. Rule 5 sat in my head. If trail camera 3 shows me standing beside the bent spruce, turn the monitor off. Do not go outside. I am not there anymore. I had not checked the monitor. I did not want to. So of course I did. The camera screen sat on a shelf beside the radio desk. There were 4 feeds. Camera 1 watched the front approach. Camera 2 watched the woodshed. Camera 3 watched the bent spruce and the tree lean behind the cabin. Camera 4 showed the relay hut door. Snow filled most of the feeds. Camera 3 flickered. For a second, it showed static. Then the image cleared. My uncle stood beside the bent spruce. I knew it was him. Not because the image was clear. It was not. It was grainy and washed in infrared gray. But I knew the shape of him. The narrow shoulders. The old canvas coat. The cap with the short brim. The way he stood with his left hand tucked close to his body, like he was holding a cigarette even after he quit. He was facing the camera. Facing me. My first thought was not fear. It was grief. That surprised me. I had not let myself feel much about Cal. He had been missing too long. Too distant. Too strange. He was more paperwork than person by then. But seeing him there, in that frozen screen, hit something old in me. I leaned closer. That was another mistake. The camera image stuttered. My uncle raised his right hand. Not a wave. Just lifted it slowly until his palm faced the lens. Behind me, the cabin wall creaked. The old thermal printer clicked once. I turned the monitor off. I turned it off so fast the plastic button cracked under my thumb. Then I sat in the chair and stared at the dark screen. The printer had produced one strip of paper. I did not want to read it. I did anyway. It said, "He is not there anymore." All caps. No period. I put it in the stove. It curled black and disappeared. At 8:30, no radio call came. I waited. 8:31. 8:32. 8:35. Nothing. The storm screamed around the cabin. At 8:41, the radio crackled. Braid 12, main station. Evening check. I reached for the handset, then stopped. Rule 3. Do not answer the radio after dark unless the caller gives the station code first. They had said Braid 12. That was the station code. I picked up. Main station, Braid 12. Relay online. Amber alignment warning from wind. Battery 24.9. Temperature -24. Static. Then a different voice said, "Evan Andrew Holt." I did not breathe. It was my uncle's voice. Not as I remembered it from childhood, rough and amused. This was older. Dry. Close to the microphone. "Evan Andrew Holt," it said again. I had not heard my full name spoken by him since I was maybe 12 and had cracked the windshield of his old truck with a rock. The handset felt heavy in my hand. The rule told me exactly what to do. If the caller uses your full name, remove the battery and put it in the flour tin until the clock reaches the next hour. But the radio was mounted to the desk. It did not have a little battery like a walkie-talkie. Then I remembered the backup handheld Mara had left charging on the shelf. It was on. Its tiny screen glowed orange. The voice came from both radios now. "Evan Andrew Holt." The mounted radio. The handheld. Together. I dropped the handset. It swung by its cord and hit the desk. I grabbed the handheld, fumbled the back open, and pulled out the battery. The voice cut off from that unit, but the mounted radio kept hissing. There was a tin of flour in the pantry. Big, round, dented, with a lid that fit too tightly. I shoved the battery into the flower, pushed the lid down, and came back out. The mounted radio was silent. The wall clock read 8:44. I sat at the table and watched the minute hand. I do not know why putting a battery in flour mattered. I still do not. But I know this. At 8:57, something tapped the inside of the flour tin. Once. Then again. Then again. Soft. Patient. Like a finger from inside. I did not touch it until 9 o'clock. When I opened the tin, the battery was coated white. Something had written on it through the flour. 6 letters. Caleb? With the question mark. The next morning, the main station called at 8:05. Mara's voice came through clean. Braid 12, main station. You missed evening confirmation. No, I said. My voice sounded wrong. You didn't transmit, she said. We got static for about 10 seconds. Then nothing, I answered. You didn't transmit, she repeated. I looked at the radio desk. The handset hung neatly on its hook. I did not remember putting it back. Mara, I said. Did you know my middle name? No. Did Cal? I assumed so. I rubbed my eyes. What happened to him? The radio stayed quiet long enough that I thought the signal had dropped. Then Mara said, he walked out. That's all? That's what the tracks showed. To where? To the bent spruce. I looked toward the closed curtain. And then? And then there were no tracks. I waited for her to explain. She did not. Mara, what is this place? Her answer came back flat. It's a cabin with a radio relay. Do your morning check? Then the transmission ended. I got angry after that. Fear is tiring. Anger is easier. I told myself everyone was treating me like a child. My uncle had gone missing in a storm. Mara was hiding details because she thought I could not handle them. The notes were the product of isolation and maybe a mind that had begun to go bad. I decided I would read the whole notebook and find the reasonable explanation. That day, I sat at the table with coffee and went through every page. For years, the entries were normal. Then, 5 winters before he disappeared, Cal started noting things that did not fit. A boot print under table. Not mine. Radio repeated last night's check at 3:10 a.m. Porch light on. Switch off. Slept in pantry. Voice at back door asked for Dale. Said wrong name. Did not answer. Trail 3 showed cabin from uphill. We do not have uphill camera. Floor knocks during wind. Said occupied. Stopped. The name Dale appeared often. Dale Morris. I did not know who that was. I found it on a loose page near the back. Dale Morris had built the cabin in 1978. He was a seasonal fire observer before the preserve absorbed that land. He froze to death in 1986, half a mile from the cabin, wearing indoor slippers and carrying a lantern with no fuel. After Dale died, the cabin sat empty for years. Then a man named Henry Vale used it for trapping. Henry disappeared. Then my uncle took the caretaker agreement. There were notes about Henry too. H. Vale seen at woodshed. H. Vale voice asked to be let in. H. Vale no longer owner. Do not answer to him. That sentence stayed with me. No longer owner. Not dead. Not missing. No longer owner. I turned to the rules again. Rule 6. If anyone asks who owns the cabin after dark, say, Caleb Holt does. Do not give your name. For the first time, I wondered if the rule was not meant to protect the cabin. Maybe it was meant to protect me from becoming part of whatever list the cabin kept. I closed the notebook. Outside, snow moved gently past the windows. It looked almost peaceful. Then something knocked under the floor. 3 taps. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just knuckles on wood beneath my boots. I did not move. The cabin was raised on posts, with about 2 feet of crawl space beneath the floor. In summer, a person could get under there on their stomach. In winter, snow packed around the sides, sealing it in. 3 more knocks. This time directly under the table. Rule 4. If something knocks from under the floor, do not look through the cracks. Knock once on the black stove and say, "Occupied." Do not say anything else. There were gaps between some floorboards. Thin black lines full of dust. I looked at one. I wish I could tell you I did not. But I looked. Not through it. Just at it. That was enough. Something under the floor breathed out. Warm air pushed up through the crack. It smelled like wet wool and old tobacco. I stood so fast the chair fell back. The knocks came again. 3. Then 2. Then 1. Not random. Testing. I went to the stove. The black iron was hot enough that I felt it on my knuckles before I touched it. I knocked once on the side. "Occupied," I said. My voice shook. The floor went quiet. For maybe 5 seconds I thought it had worked. Then my uncle's voice came from under the floorboards. "That's not what you used to call me." I clamped both hands over my mouth. Do not say anything else. My mind filled with every name I had ever called him. Uncle Cal. Cal. You old bastard. Hey. Please. The voice under the floor shifted. You used to sleep on that rug when your mother brought you up here. I looked at the old braided rug near the stove. I had forgotten that. I was 7, maybe 8. My mother and I came in July. Cal let me sleep on the floor because I wanted to be near the fire, even though it was summer and we barely needed it. I remembered waking up to adults arguing quietly outside. My mother saying, "You can't keep doing this." Cal saying, "I don't keep anything. It keeps me." I had buried that memory so completely that hearing it again felt like having someone reach into my head with cold fingers. Under the floor, Cal said. She knew. I closed my eyes. Do not say anything else. The voice changed. Not all at once. It became my mother's voice on the last word. She knew. I walked into the bedroom, shut the door, and sat on the bunk until morning. I did not sleep. The knocking did not come back. But around 3 a.m., something moved under the bed. Not touching it. Not scratching. Just shifting its weight in the dark space underneath. In the morning, there were no marks in the crawl space. I dug around the side of the cabin with a shovel until my hands hurt. Snow was packed hard against the skirting. No tunnel. No animal hole. No sign anything had gone in or out. That would have made sense, except the underside of the floorboards below the table were wet. Not with water. With melted frost. From breath. I started packing that afternoon. I did not make a big decision. There was no dramatic moment. I simply pulled my duffel from under the bunk and started putting clothes into it. Then I stopped. The truck would not start. I already knew that before I turned the key, somehow. The engine clicked once. Then nothing. I checked the battery. It was fine. I checked the terminals. Tight. Fuel line. Fine. Starter fuse. Fine. I tried again. Click. Nothing. The radio in the cabin crackled. I went inside. I stood by the desk but did not touch the handset. It was only 3:14 p.m. Still light, though the sky was dim. Braid 12, main station, Mara said. You there? I grabbed it. Here. You sound bad. Truck won't start. Cold does that. It's not the battery. Could still be cold. I need someone to come out. Weather hissed behind her voice. Not today, Mara. Roads closed. Drifted at Blind Creek. We can try tomorrow if wind drops. I looked at the black notebook on the table. How long did Cal try to leave? Mara did not answer. You knew about the rules, I said. Still nothing. Mara. When she came back, her voice was lower. Your uncle made me promise not to interfere unless you asked to break the agreement. I'm asking. No, she said. You're asking for a mechanic. That's different. I almost laughed. It came out like a cough. What the hell does that mean? It means words matter out there. I looked toward the pantry. The flour tins sat on the shelf, clean and ordinary. Mara, who owns this cabin? The radio went silent. It stayed silent for so long that I thought I had lost the signal. Then she said, Not after dark. It isn't dark. It's close enough. That was all she would say. I wanted to hate her for that. Part of me still does. But later I understood that fear makes people careful, and careful people can sound cruel. I stayed. I told myself it was one more night. The road might clear. The truck might start once it warmed. Mara might send someone. At 5 o'clock, I did the evening check. The relay hut panel was all green again. I wrote it down. When I came back, I closed the curtains and latched the doors. I made soup from a can. I ate half. I threw the rest away because it tasted like metal. At 8:30, the radio call came. This time it gave the code properly. Braid 12, main station. Evening check. I answered. Main station, Braid 12. Relay online. Battery 25.1. Temperature -22. No issues. The voice that replied was not Mara. It was the mail dispatcher from my first night. Copy. No issues. I almost hung up. Then he said, Can you confirm name of present occupant for the winter record? My hand tightened on the handset. What? Confirm name of present occupant for the winter record. The line crackled. I looked at the rules. They were on the table beside the logbook. Rule 6 did not say anything about the radio. It said if anyone asks who owns the cabin after dark. He had asked occupant, not owner. That distinction mattered to my tired brain. It mattered too much. Why? I asked. Standard record update. I looked at the clock. 8:32 p.m. After dark. Who is this? I asked. Main station. Give me your name. Static. Then, very softly, the voice said, You know mine. I put the handset down without answering. Not on the hook. Just down on the desk. The radio began to hum. Not static. Hum. A low tone, almost like someone holding one note in their throat. I backed away. The hum continued. Then it moved. That is the only way I can describe it. It moved from the radio into the walls. The cabin hummed. The stovepipe. The floorboards. The window glass behind the curtains. Everything. Then the porch light came on. I knew because even through the curtains, the room changed. A pale yellow line appeared along the bottom of the front curtain. I had not touched the switch. It was 8:34 p.m. Rule 2 said after 10 p.m. After 10, keep the porch light off. If you look out and see it on anyway, do not touch the switch. Go into the pantry and stay there until it goes dark by itself. It was not after 10. Again, my brain tried to make that matter. Rules are dangerous that way. You start looking for loopholes. I went to the front door. Not close. Just close enough to see the switch beside it. It was down. Off. Lights still glowed through the curtain. Then someone knocked on the door. 2 knocks. Polite. Normal. I almost answered. That is hard to admit. It was such an ordinary knock. Not under the floor. Not scratching. Not a voice from a dead man. Just a knock at the front door while the porch light was on. A person knocks. You answer. That is how deep routine goes. My hand was halfway to the bolt when Rule 1 came back. Do not open them again until you hear the first bird call after dawn. I stopped. A woman outside said, Evan? Mara. It was Mara's voice. I stepped back. Evan, open up. I said nothing. I know you're scared, she said. I came in by snow machine. Open the door. The radio hummed behind me. The porch light burned. The cabin felt too warm. I wanted it to be her. I wanted that so badly I almost convinced myself. Then she said, I need you to tell me who owns the cabin. My knees went weak. I backed away from the door. The voice outside became sharper. Evan, listen to me. This is official. I need you to confirm ownership. I whispered. Caleb Holt does. The knocking stopped. The hum stopped. The porch light went out. All at once. The sudden dark felt like falling. I stood there until my legs hurt. Then I went into the pantry anyway and sat on the floor between the flour and the lanterns until morning. At 8:11, the bird called. I opened the curtains. No tracks on the porch. No snow machine marks. No sign anyone had come near the cabin. At 8:30, Mara called. The real Mara. Braid 12, main station. Morning check. I did not answer right away. Braid 12? I picked up the handset. Here. You missed something last night? You came to the door. No. I heard you. No, she said again, softer this time. It asked who owned the cabin. A long breath came over the radio. What did you say? Caleb Holt does. Good. That single word made me angry again. Good? That's all? Good is all I've got. What happens if I say my name? Mara did not answer. I pressed the handset so hard the plastic creaked. What happens? When she spoke again, she sounded older. Kel said it starts with the records. What records? All of them. The line popped. Then she added, Don't let it update you. I wrote that sentence in the log. Do not let it update you. I stared at it for a long time. It sounded ridiculous. It also sounded exactly right. After that, the cabin changed. Not physically. Not in a way someone else would notice. But I noticed. My mug was always on the wrong side of the sink. The chair at the radio desk was pulled out every morning, even when I pushed it in at night. The stove damper was adjusted while I slept. Once I woke up and found my boots warming by the stove, lying neatly on newspaper. I had left them by the door. The next day, the logbook had an entry I did not write. 7 o'clock morning check. Battery good. Occupant still inside. The handwriting looked like mine if I wrote with my left hand. I tore the page out and burned it. The page was back the next morning. Same entry. Same tear marks. Same burned edge. I stopped sleeping more than an hour at a time. The dark lasted too long. That was the real problem. People talk about fear like it comes in moments. A sound. A face. A door opening. But fear over time becomes weather. It gets into your routines. You measure coffee by it. You walk around it. You learn which floorboards to avoid because they are close to the gaps. You learn not to look directly at the curtains when something casts a shadow from the wrong side. You learn that your own name can start to feel unsafe. By the 17th day, I had stopped saying it out loud. Not on the radio. Not to myself. Not even in my head if I could help it. I signed the log as B12. That felt childish. I did it anyway. On the 19th night, trail camera 3 came back on by itself. I had left the monitor unplugged after seeing my uncle. At 11:06 p.m., the screen lit up. I was asleep in the chair when the glow woke me. Camera 3 filled the display. The bent spruce. The snow. The black tree line. At first, no one was there. Then my uncle stepped into frame. I say stepped because that is how my mind understood it. But looking back, he did not enter from the left or right. He simply became visible, one thin part at a time, like the camera remembered him. He stood beside the tree in his old coat. His right hand hung at his side. I reached for the power button. Then I saw someone behind him. Me. I was standing in the tree line. Not the real me. I was inside, watching. The me on the screen wore my red flannel jacket, the one hanging by the stove. He stood very still, half hidden behind spruce branches. His face was pale and infrared. My uncle raised his right hand. The me in the trees raised his too. I turned off the monitor. The screen went black. In that black reflection, I saw the room behind me. The stove. The table. The shelves. And a person standing at the pantry door. I spun around. No one was there. The pantry door was closed. I slept in the chair with a knife in my lap. I know how that sounds. A knife would not have helped. I knew that then too. But holding it gave my hands something to do. The next morning, my red flannel jacket was gone. I found it outside on the bent spruce. Frozen stiff. Buttoned around the trunk like someone had dressed the tree. There were no footprints leading to it. The snow under the tree was smooth. I left the jacket there. At noon, it was back inside, hanging by the stove. Still frozen. Still buttoned. I called Mara. I broke down more than I wanted to. I told her about the jacket, the radio, the voice, the logbook, the porch light, the thing under the floor. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "I can send 2 rangers tomorrow if the road holds." Tomorrow? That's the soonest. I'm leaving on foot. No. You don't get to say no. If you leave in daylight and keep moving, maybe. If you're still out after dark, you'll hear people calling from behind you. You'll think it's us. You'll think it's Cal. You'll think it's your mother. Don't turn around. I laughed once, hard and ugly. You people knew. Yes. And you let me come. You signed. You think that matters? I think it matters to the thing asking questions. I did not know what to say to that. Mara continued. Your uncle kept it quiet for a long time. He thought the cabin had to be occupied. He thought if it sat empty, things wandered farther. What things? I don't know. That's not good enough. No, she said. It isn't. I asked her why she had not warned me plainly before I came. She said, because plain warnings make people test them. I hated her because she was right. Then she said something I did not understand until later. Cal didn't leave you the cabin because he wanted you to have it. I waited. He left it because you were next on paper. Next for what? The radio hissed. Mara? Nothing. The signal dropped. That afternoon, I searched every drawer, shelf, box, and tin in the cabin. I do not know what I expected to find. A map. A confession. A normal explanation. In the bottom drawer of the dresser, under a stack of old wool socks, I found a folder. Inside were copies of ownership papers. Dale Morris. Henry Vale. Caleb Holt. And then me. My full legal name, printed on a transfer form dated 3 weeks before I arrived. The form had not been signed. Not by me. Not by anyone. At the bottom, in a box labeled Current Recognized Occupant, someone had typed, "Pending confirmation." I stared at those words until they blurred. Pending confirmation. Under that form was a photograph. It showed my uncle sitting at the cabin table, older than I remembered but alive. He looked tired. Behind him, the curtains were closed. The black notebook lay open in front of him. On the back, he had written, "If they ask, let me keep it." That was when Rule 6 changed meaning for me. I had thought it was about lying to strangers. Then I thought it was about ownership. But it was not really about either. It was about keeping the dark pointed at a name that was already gone. Caleb Holt does. My uncle had made himself the answer. Maybe for years. Maybe every night. Maybe the reason he disappeared was not that he broke the rule. Maybe he got tired of keeping it. I sat on the edge of the bed with the folder in my lap and understood something I still wish I did not. The cabin did not want me dead. Death was too simple. It wanted a correction. A record. A name that matched the person inside. At 4:55, I did the evening check. I almost skipped it, but some part of me was still afraid of doing anything wrong. That is how routines trap you. The panel in the relay hut showed all green. I logged the numbers. As I was locking the hut, I heard the cabin door open behind me. I turned. The front door stood wide open. Warm light spilled onto the snow. I had latched it. I knew I had. A figure stood in the doorway. It looked like me. Not exactly. More like someone had watched me from a distance and learned the basics. My height. My coat. My posture. Its face was wrong in small ways. Too blank around the eyes. Mouth slightly open. Head tilted like it was listening to instructions no one else could hear. I was 30 yards from the cabin with the key in my hand and the storm beginning to rise again. The figure lifted one hand. Not a wave. A slow raise of the palm. Like my uncle on the camera. Then it stepped back inside and shut the door. I stood in the snow until my fingers burned from cold. The guide rope ran from the relay hut to the porch. I followed it back. At the door I stopped. The latch was set from inside. I knocked once. I do not know why. Maybe because it was my cabin. Maybe because I wanted to see what would answer. From inside, my own voice said, "Who owns the cabin?" I backed away. The rule had always imagined someone outside asking in. I had never thought about being outside while something inside asked me. The door did not open. My breath smoked in front of my face. The sky was going dark. I had maybe 10 minutes of usable light left. I could go to the relay hut and lock myself in. It had no stove, but it was insulated. I might survive the night if the temperature did not drop too far. I could try the truck again. I could break a window. I could run. Instead, I stood on the porch and said, "Caleb Holt does." The latch lifted. The door opened inward. No one stood inside. The cabin was warm. The curtains were closed. The stove was burning. My boots were by the mat, though I had them on my feet. A second pair. Same scuffs. Same broken lace on the left. I stepped over them and shut the door. That night, the main radio did not call at 8:30. The handheld did. It was still in pieces on the shelf. The battery was still in the flour tin. The empty handheld clicked on anyway. Braid 12, it said in Mara's voice. Emergency weather update. I did not touch it. Braid 12, do you copy? I stared at the flour tin. The lid trembled. Station code, I whispered. The radio voice paused. Then it said, Braid 12. That was not the code. That was my station. I did not answer. The voice changed to the male dispatcher. Present occupant must confirm identity for safety evacuation. I did not answer. It changed to my mother. Honey, they need your name. I shut my eyes. Do not answer. Please, my mother said. I'm cold. I put my hands over my ears. That helped for maybe 5 seconds. Then her voice came from under the floor. I'm cold down here. 3 knocks. Directly under my chair. I stood up. 3 knocks again. I went to the stove. Knocked once. Occupied. The floor answered with my voice. Pending. The porch light came on. It was 9:12. Not after 10. I went to the pantry anyway. I sat on the floor in the dark, knees pulled up, back against the shelves. The cabin outside the pantry door continued without me. That is the best way I can explain what I heard. Someone walked from the stove to the sink. A pan was moved. The chair was pulled out. The logbook opened. The radio clicked. My voice said calm and clear. Main station, Braid 12. Evening check. Static. My voice continued. Relay online. Battery 24.7. Temperature -26. No issues. A pause. Then my voice said, Present occupant is. It stopped. The pantry door had no lock. I held the knob with both hands. On the other side, footsteps crossed the room. Slow. The floorboards creaked exactly under the same places they creaked when I walked. The steps stopped outside the pantry. My voice said, I forgot. It sounded embarrassed. Almost human. I forgot our name. I pressed my forehead to the door and bit the inside of my cheek to keep quiet. It knocked. Not on the pantry door. From below me. Under the pantry floor. 3 taps. Then my mother's voice whispered from the shelves behind my head. Tell him. I screamed then. Not words. Just sound. Everything went quiet. The porch light went out. I stayed in the pantry until morning. When the bird finally called, I opened the door. The cabin looked normal. The logbook was open on the table. The latest entry read, Evening check incomplete. Occupant withheld confirmation. Under that, in my uncle's handwriting, another line had been added. Good boy. I sat down and cried. I am not ashamed of that. There are things a person can carry, and there are things that reduce you to an animal sitting in a chair, making sounds you do not recognize. At 9:20 that morning, Mara arrived with 2 rangers. I saw them through the front window after the bird call. 3 snow machines came up the trail, headlights dim in the gray morning. Mara got off first. She did not come to the door right away. She stood in the yard, looking at the cabin like she expected it to speak. The 2 rangers with her were younger. 1 man, 1 woman. Both kept their hands near their radios. I opened the door before they knocked. Mara looked at my face and said, You didn't give it. No. Good. That word again. This time it almost broke me. The young male ranger checked the truck. It started on the first try. Of course it did. He said the starter might have stuck from cold. Nobody argued. I packed in 10 minutes. I took my duffel, the folder, the rules, and the black notebook. I left everything else. Mara watched me from the doorway. You can't take the logbook, she said. It was my uncle's. It belongs to the station. I don't care. Her face tightened. Then she stepped aside. That scared me more than if she had fought me. Before we left, the younger woman ranger went into the relay hut to copy the final readings. She came back pale. What? Mara asked. The ranger looked at me, then at the cabin. Panel says station transfer completed. Mara closed her eyes. I said, What does that mean? No one answered. The ride out felt unreal. Daylight made everything look harmless. Snow on spruce. Low clouds. The long white road. The empty clearing where they had found Cal's truck. I kept checking behind us. Once, near Blind Creek, I thought I saw the cabin between the trees even though we were miles away. Green roof. Warm window. Porch light off. Then the road turned, and it was gone. At the maintenance yard, Mara brought me inside the office and gave me coffee I could not drink. She told me I should stay in town for a few days. She said someone would call about the paperwork. She said the cabin agreement could be terminated. I asked her if it was over. She looked at the black notebook on the table between us. Did you say your name in the cabin? No. Did you say it on the road? No. Did you sign anything? No. Then maybe. Maybe. That was the best she could give me. I drove back to Anchorage that afternoon. The city felt too loud. Too bright. Too full of people who had no idea that rules could keep a thing outside a door, or that a name could be something you protected like a flame in wind. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. I slept with lights on. I ignored calls from numbers I did not know. I returned the black notebook by mail because Mara left 3 messages asking for it, each one more strained than the last. I kept the folded rules. I do not know why. Maybe proof. Maybe punishment. Then the first envelope arrived. No return address. Inside was a strip of thermal paper. The kind from the cabin printer. It said, Order received. I burned it in my kitchen sink. The next day, my landlord called. He said someone from the state had contacted him about a records correction. What records? I asked. He said he did not know. Occupancy, maybe. Emergency contact. Something about winter property status. I hung up before he finished. That night, at exactly 10 o'clock, the light outside my apartment door turned on. It is a cheap hallway light. Motion sensor. It turns on when someone walks past. I was sitting on my couch with all the curtains closed. The yellow line appeared under my front door. I did not move. No footsteps came. No knock. Just the light. After a while, it went dark by itself. I told myself it was just a glitch. I did not sleep. The next morning, there was flour on the floor outside my apartment. A thin white dusting in front of the door. Something had written in it with one finger. Not my full name. Not yet. Just my first initial. E. I called Mara. The number had been disconnected. I called the main ranger station. They said no one named Mara Voss worked there. I asked for Braid 12. The woman on the phone paused. Then she said that station had been decommissioned after the death of its last official caretaker, Caleb Holt. When? I asked. She gave me a date. 3 weeks before I arrived. I tried to explain that I had been there. That I had signed the agreement. That rangers had come to get me. She asked for my name. I hung up. That was 4 months ago. I moved twice. It did not help. The folded rules are on my table now. I have added a 7th one, though I do not know if it matters. Do not answer questions through a closed door. I live in a 3rd-floor apartment in a city with traffic outside and neighbors on both sides. I work days now. I keep a radio playing when I sleep, not because I like the noise, but because silence has weight. Most nights are normal. That is the worst part. Normal nights make you feel foolish. Then, once every few weeks, the hallway light turns on at 10 p.m. and stays on until I sit in the pantry closet with the door shut. I do not have a pantry, not really. Just a closet beside the kitchen. But it is windowless. That seems to matter. Last night, I woke up before dawn because something knocked under my floor. 3 taps. I live above a parking garage. There is no apartment under me. I went to the stove because old habits stay in the body, but I do not have a black wood stove here. I have a white electric range. I knocked once on it anyway. I said, "Occupied." For a while nothing happened. Then my uncle's voice came from the vent near the floor. It sounded tired. It sounded close. It said, "Not for long." This morning, I found a page from the cabin logbook under my door. I know that is impossible because I mailed it back. I know because I watched the clerk weigh the package and print the label. The page was dated today. The handwriting was mine. 7 o'clock morning check. Battery good. Occupant still inside. Confirmation pending. I have not called anyone. I do not know what I would say. I do not even like writing this, because writing names down feels dangerous now. But I needed there to be some record that came from me while I was still myself. So if you ever inherit a remote cabin, or take a winter job at a station no one wants, and someone leaves rules that sound ridiculous, do not test them. Do not look for loopholes. Do not let ordinary things fool you. A porch light can be a question. A radio can be a mouth. A cabin can remember paperwork better than people do. And if something asks who owns the place after dark, do not give it your name. Tonight, it asked me who owns my apartment.